The Pittsburgh Steelers beat the Cincinnati Bengals 16-10. I'll give you all the reasons why, Steelers fans, you should believe in the offense's improvement in this game. All that and more here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting app and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs will help you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Pittsburgh Steelers fans, it's a victory Monday. Your Pittsburgh Steelers win 16-10 over the Cincinnati Bengals, and that advances them to 7-4, putting them right in the thick of the AFC playoff race. Right now, as it would start, the Steelers would be the 5th seed in the AFC playoff race, but they are only a game back from all the teams that are ahead of them, minus the Baltimore Ravens. Because of their win, they are a game and a half ahead of them because they haven't had their bye week. But if the Steelers win next week, they'd be a game behind the Ravens, and they'd be right on pace to make sure that as long as they handle their business, it could all come down to Week 18 when they play the Ravens for the AFC North title. But let's get into the win, because I think that's the big story. Of course, we want to focus on today with this group, and it's the offense gaining over 400 yards for the first time since 2020 in the first game without Matt Canada. And oh boy, there's a lot of talking points there. Now, here's the thing: a lot of people are going to point at, well, Chris, they only scored 16 points. That's still not good, but the offense was better, structurally better. And you're probably thinking, okay, what does that mean? Structurally better. Hear me out here. It's also very relevant for Canada, Faulkner, Sullivan, the guys involved. Eddie Faulkner, the new offensive coordinator, Mike Sullivan, the new play caller. And there were a lot of things to like about what the Steelers did. Sure, a lot of things to not like too, as well as, Deontay Johnson not securing the catch in the end zone. We can argue all day about whether it was or not a catch, but if he holds on to that ball, it's a touchdown. Steelers go up 7-0. Whole different other story. Then the Jalen Warren fumble also cost points. There were certain stalls mistakes that happened in the game, but there was a path to what the offense was doing, and that path produced success. Kenny Pickett looked like he had a plan. A lot of his throws, more detailed, seemed like a better understanding of where he wanted to go with the football within the structure of a play, understanding, hey, if they're giving me this look on defense, I attack this part of the field. That's something we hadn't really seen out of him outside of spurts in the fourth quarter in previous weeks. That's a very good sign. Kenny Pickett on the day, 24 of 33, 278 passing yards. Sure, no touchdowns, but he had no interceptions, and that was a big part of it, and he moved the ball. And I think that was a big part of what Kenny Pickett did right in this game. When you look at how he played, was that he found a way to keep finding the different receivers. And yeah, sure, there were some misses, there were some reads that he could have had back, but for a lot of the people who were saying in some of Kenny Pickett's really bad games that, oh man, you can pick apart certain plays and you can find certain things wrong. That's how I feel about this game. Kenny Pickett had a good game this week. When you look at his numbers now, I believe this is now the 7th straight game that he's not thrown an interception. Sure, again, during that time, he's only thrown 2 touchdowns, I believe, but that's still a great stretch, and that's a big part of the reason why the Steelers are still winning football games despite not throwing touchdowns in that span. And in this game, he did kind of throw a touchdown to Deontay Johnson if he holds on to it. And I think that he gave the Steelers every chance to win in this one. You saw the way that he was processing through the game, through the throws that he was making. He was going through his progressions. He was reading the defense. Very good sign. He also used the middle of the field, found Pat Freiermuth, 120 receiving yards for him, most in his career. That was huge. Looked like, again, with the processing of the field, this was the version of Kenny Pickett and the baseline version of the Kenny Pickett that I think the Steelers absolutely need for him to be the franchise quarterback moving forward. If he can have more games like this, I think it's a very good sign that you could start to see more and more improvement from him. Also had some great deep balls to Deontay Johnson and George Pickens down the sidelines. Both were huge, well placed right on the money, and gave the Steelers big plays when they needed him. And that balanced out was a really good run game. Najee Harris was on it. And that was another good sign of the offense taking steps forward. He had 99 total rushing yards on 15 carries. He lost a yard on his last run of the game when the Steelers kind of just ran into a stacked box because they were trying to grind the clock out. Also had a rushing touchdown. Really good performance from him. Jaylen Warren did have the fumble, but still I think averaged over four yards per carry. So, actually just under 4 yards per carry, but still Jaylen Warren found other ways to succeed. And you see the balance of those guys coming in. And that whole balance of the offense is a big key to what they've been striving to get to for the Steelers. And again, this is now the fourth time in a row that the Steelers have had over 150 rushing yards in a game. That's huge for what the Steelers want to do with this offense. And that's a big part of what the Steelers want to be, is they want to be able to run the ball. They talked about playing bully ball, and you saw late in the game there on one of the field goal drives, Najee Harris was able to get going, and he was running physical and wore down the Bengals defense that was getting tired. And again, I look at the way they ran the ball, the way Kenny Pickett saw the field and took advantage of things. Yes, you want 16 more points, and there were certainly a lot of things to clean up to get there. But this was the kind of performance you wanted from Kenny Pickett. This was the kind of performance you wanted from your offense to at least move the ball and keep things going forward. And I think it's a very good sign of where the offense could be headed if they can put things together. Now, you're probably sitting here saying, well, Chris, again, still 16. I'm not trying to hear all about the 421 yards. I'm not trying to hear about them doing this. But I think there were structured things, again, that were worked into this game plan and worked into how the Steelers executed in this game that show that this is a more sustainable win than the Steelers have had in their recent weeks, really all season. And we talked about that question is this sustainable week in and week out? And yes, this is still a 16-10, a 6-point win, single possession game, low scoring. But there were multiple aspects of this offense that I think proved that there is sustainability and room for this offense to maintain this as the foundation, that this is the floor for their performance moving forward, and get higher and higher to get better chances at easier wins moving forward. We'll talk about those three things. There are three key aspects of this win that I think are the most promising for the Steelers offense. We'll talk about all of that in a minute here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We got a lot to discuss. But first, I want to remind you this show is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You need to find the right people on your team to help your small business fire on all cylinders, and that's where LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find the people that you want to talk to faster and for free. Create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. Then add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile and spread the word that you're hiring so your network can help you find the right people to hire. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know every week nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. This episode is also brought to you by BetterHelp Therapy Online. Life is full of twists and turns, and it's important to show up for yourself through all of them. Trust me, I faced plenty of times in my life when I've tried to shoulder on a lot of burdens, take on a lot of things on my own, and not talk to anybody. But the best times I've found answers in my life was because of help of good therapists. That's where BetterHelp Online Therapy comes in to help you. If you go to BetterHelp Online Therapy, they'll assess your needs and can match you with your own licensed professional therapist in less than 48 hours. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's actual professional therapy being done online and available to people worldwide. You can log into your account anytime and send a message to your therapist whenever you need to. And that is so important in the world of working with therapists, because that can often lead to, when you're struggling the most, to make sure that your therapist is there to help you through that. And with therapy, it can take a few tries to find the right fit for you. That's where BetterHelp makes it easy and free for you to come in and help, because they make it easy and free to change therapists if needed at any point in time while using their service. So They have a special offer right now. All our listeners can get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's betterhelp.com/lockedon to sign up for your 10% off your first month when you try out BetterHelp Therapy online. Trust me, you'll thank me when you do. Back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue to talk about the Steelers' 16-10 win here. Let's talk about a few other things that are part of this win that I think are really important. So you're probably, again, thinking, Chris, it's 16-10. Why should I think this win is any different? And I just went over Kenny Pickett and how he saw the field and read the field and made plays. I went over Najee Harris and how they ran the ball. But let's look at some other key factors that are more structured and built into the game and often determine who wins and loses. First of all, the offense possessed the football. In this game, they had a time of possession of 37 minutes and 17 seconds. That is the best time of possession that they have had all year long. And only twice have they even won time of possession this year. And both times were less than 31 minutes in winning so. So basically, when they won time of possession, it's just marginally so. The other team's been just behind them with 29 seconds and some change, 29 minutes and some change. But this time, they held the Bengals offense to have the ball for less than 23 minutes. And TJ Watt talked about how after the game about how huge that was for the Steelers defense, because he said, I haven't sat on the bench that long and I don't know how long. And that allowed the defense to stay fresh all game. That allowed the defense to focus on and try to limit the possibilities of the Bengals. It also limited the chances for the Bengals to strike lucky and find some big plays, because how many times have the Steelers lost games because their defense has had to go out there time and time again and have to defend, and eventually they just hit on a couple small plays here and there, and then it leads to a game-winning field goal. Oh, look, that just happened last week. That's where the difference in the offense really made it happen. You keep the ball on your side of the field, and you keep your ball with your offense. It lets your defense have limited times to have to be out there, keeps them fresher, and gives you a better chance to win game. That's part number one. Part number two, they crushed it on third downs in this game. They went 8 of 17 total in the game, but really it was 8 of 16 because one of those third downs was a third down kneel down at the end of the game. So you're talking about 50% on third downs in this game. That is way up from the 36% rate that they've had going into this game. And yes, 50% is not sustainable. No team is hitting 50% on third downs right now in the NFL. Eagles might be, I think they were the closest to it, and they might be in that comp. They might have broached it temporarily with their win over the Bills. But point being, that's not going to hold for the rest of the year. But if they can, for the rest of the year, hover around like 44%, which I do think is doable with the way that they're trying to play offense, that would be seventh best in the NFL as a rate right now. That would be right ahead of CJ Stroud and the Texans and right behind Brock Purdy and the 49ers. I feel like that'd be a very good place to be for this Steelers offense moving forward. So again, you got time of possession, you got third downs, and those kind of carry with each other hand in hand. And that's a big part of what the Steelers are trying to do to be a better offense. On top of scoring points, and you have to score points. You need to score points. But on the way to scoring points, there's a process to get there. And that's where I'm talking about sustainability, because there's a process. And the thing that makes those two things possible, and that's the biggest part of this process, is that how the balance was there on offense. And that's the third big key here. When you look at the balance, Najee Harris had 15 carries. Jaylen Warren had 13 carries. Balance between them. But even more important, you had 29 rushes that were actually rushes in this game and not just kneel downs, and to 33 pass attempts for Kenny Pickett. That's the right pace right there. You pass when you need to, you take what's there, but you run the ball enough so that those guys can keep wearing down the defense and keep getting more opportunities. That doesn't. It also never relies on one player's overall just singular talent to carry this team moving forward, which again allows things to balance all around. Now teams can't focus on hey, we have to take away Pat Freiermuth. Okay, take away Pat Freiermuth. George Pickens is there. Deontay Johnson is there. And Kenny Pickett was able to use his legs a few times in this game. The run game is there. You want to focus on the run game when Najee Harris on the field? Cool. Focus on it too when Jaylen Warren is on the field. Focus on both of them on the field. Okay, you're going to give up a lot of one-on-ones. And eventually, you're going to be a defense that's going to be struggling. Oh, okay. Do we worry about Pat Freiermuth? Do we worry about Deontay Johnson? Do we worry about George Pickens? Do we worry about the run game? That is where the Steelers can start to find find places to work in their wheelhouse and make this offense a much better unit. I'm not saying an elite unit. I'm not saying a great unit. I'm not saying a very, very good unit. I'm just saying a decent, solid unit. We talked about this all offseason leading into this year. We talked about it in the early part of the season. If this offense can just get to decent and get them in the middle part, like a little above the middle part of the league with the way the defense is playing, and we'll get to the defense in the third segment because they played a really good game and there's a lot of good things that they're doing. But if they're playing, like at the rate that I think that they can get to with the way that they want to play and the structure they're playing, this team can be very formidable against every team it faces in the NFL. Now, again, there's still a lot of work to do for this offense. They're far from where they need to be. They still have to get there, but there's a legitimate path for them to get there right now and for them to figure out. Kenny Pickett can look at this tape and have confidence to say, okay, we did these things right. Let's do these things right next week. Let's add on to it. And again, it goes back to what I've been talking about. It's the execution. I bet when you look at it, all execution is tied to the organization and how prepared they were and pointed in the right direction for this game. As I had noted for weeks on this very podcast, I talked about, hey, Kenny Pickett looks like he's looking in the wrong places. He's not seeing the right things, but there are people open over the middle. There's people open at all parts of the field, deep, short, intermediate, wherever you want, and he's not seeing them. And the biggest thing that I kept saying was that, hey, the play calls are fine, but Kenny Pickett and other people in the offense don't seem to know how to execute them in the right spots. And if anything, I think this game was a sign of just that, because you go back and you look through it, there were opportunities there, and Kenny Pickett took a lot more of them in this game. That allowed them to have that balance. And then the run game as well. It's like they have a better feel for what they were doing. That's where Eddie Faulkner comes in as the organizer of the offense and why Mike Tomlin named him as offensive coordinator. And again, Mike Sullivan comes in. He's not calling too many different plays. They can't, and Kenny Pickett even said, we can't install a whole new offense in the middle of the season. But what we can do is take some of these plays, add maybe some like a wrinkle or two to them, and we can practice them in a different way to better execute them. And that's what I felt that they did. And if you look at this, it's just one game, but you can see a visible difference, again, in the structure of the offense, in the execution of the offense. And I can see this as being a floor to the offense if it plays the way it's supposed to play, and it can keep taking steps forward and steps upward if they continue to grow. And this is just, again, 1 week with the new offense on the road against a divisional opponent. You come back home now, you face two teams that have 9 losses or more in the Cardinals and the Patriots. And again, at home, these are prime opportunities for the Steelers offense to figure things out, continue to build, and maybe have some momentum getting into that final stretch of the season where they'll play some tougher opponents. They'll go on the road against a Colts team that right now looks like they'd be in the playoffs. And of course, the Seahawks, the Bengals again, and then you get to play the Ravens at the end of the year, and that could be a huge part of it. But again, the offense, I think, has showing all the signs of trending in the right direction, and if they continue to build, they're going to be a problem in the NFL. But the reason that them being just decent enough is enough for this team to be very competitive is because the defense is playing very well. And I know you're going to say, well, they just played a backup quarterback, and they played a backup quarterback last week. But the numbers speak the truth. The Steelers defense is doing what it's supposed to in the NFL, and we'll get into how those numbers support them being one of the best in the NFL in just a minute here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We still got a lot to discuss. But first, I want to remind you that this show is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They're the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports, and it's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling against thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more or less on 2 to 6 players and their stat projections, and then you just start watching the winnings roll in. Prize Picks is a fun new daily fantasy game that everyone needs to start playing right now. With basketball season here, you can also pick combo projections across football and basketball players in what's called the Specials League. It's a league created specifically for combo projections that includes 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. For example, LeBron James and Travis Kelce combined, you say at a 10.5 combo with 3-pointers made and receptions, you say more or less, and that can be a win for you in the Specials Leagues on Prize Picks. And Prize Picks has a reboot policy on injuries, and it's the only daily fantasy sports platform that offers injury insurance. What does that mean? Well, in NFL and college football top 25 games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and doesn't return in the second, that player can be rebooted. Again, PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform that offers something like that. And again, you can do PrizePicks with NFL, NBA, NHL, college sports, and so much more. Download the PrizePicks app today or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. And that's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. And when you use code LockedOnNFL, you get a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL to use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We talked a lot about the offense because legitimately exciting things to see with them getting over 400 yards in offense for the first time since 2020. But we got to talk about the defense because they were good again today. On the run, they did what they were supposed to. They held them to 2.3 yards per carry, discouraged the Bengals from even wanting to run the ball. I think they ran the ball with their running back a total 11 times in this game. That's punking them out of any chance there. And 3 of those runs were Jake Browning runs. So just 8 carries to Joe Mixon, who's the guy that they want to be able to run the ball. Joe Mixon averaged 2 yards per carry in this game. That's kicking butt at the line of scrimmage. A lot of that, Keanu Benton, Cam Hayward, Larry Ogunjobi, TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, Landon Roberts, and also throw in Michael Walker in there. We'll get to him in a little bit more there. But the run defense was there. Also, shout out to Joey Porter Jr. because Jamar Chase, sure, he had a catch reflexed on Joey Porter Jr., but he finished this game with 4 catches for 81 yards, and 2 of those catches were flukes off of tip balls that weren't even thrown right to him and weren't a result of him getting open or anything. They just got tip balls that luckily fell in his hands, and he got 45 yards off of those plays. So otherwise, Joey Porter Jr. held Jamar Chase, one of the best receivers in football, to just really 2 real earned catches in this game for less than 40 yards. That's a win all day long. And yes, it's with a backup quarterback, but that's still the matchup with the guy. I'm sure that's a matchup that the Bengals wanted to have. Jamar Chase said that they were going to put on a show. Well, it was the Steelers defense that really put on the show. And now this is the 7th straight game where the Steelers have held an opponent to 20 points or less. That is huge. You know what the crazy thing is? The last time they did it was just last year. And it's a real thing when you continue to do it. They were 6-1 during that stretch last year to end the season. They're 5-2 this year from it. Dread it, run from it. This defense is for real, and they're doing that without all these injuries. Micah Fitzpatrick has been out for a full month now, though they expect to have him back. Cam Hayward's missed 2 months for the Steelers. Cole Holcomb, the guy that they signed and thought would be the difference maker at linebacker, he's out for the season. Quan Alexander, the guy who was stepping up and being a difference maker at linebacker, he's out for the season. Keanu Neal's on injured reserve. Montravius Adams has had 2 snaps in the month of November total. This is a defense that has found ways to win with tons of backups. So as much as everyone wants to say that there's injuries to other teams that are hurting the Steelers, that are helping the Steelers are dealing with plenty of injuries themselves. Trenton Thompson, who had a key interception in this game, is the 4th safety on this team, and they're still finding ways to win. Think of this. The Steelers defense is top 10 right now, and they haven't had one. They're top 10, and if you deny that, top 10 in points allowed. They were 7th going into this week. I think they're still at 7th now, but they continue to hold teams to under 20 points. And that's been done without one whole game. And I repeat, one whole game has not been played for the Pittsburgh Steelers where TJ Watt, Micah Fitzpatrick, and Cam Hayward all played from start to finish. And I don't mean every snap of the game, but I mean being healthy to finish a game. It hasn't happened one time like yet this year. And if someone told you that had been the case, that they had played 12 games and they hadn't had their all-pro trio available for an entire one of those games, you'd think, well, defense isn't good this year. That's a big sign of what they're being able to do. And some of it is because of practice squad guys who've stepped up. Some of it is because of rookies. Keanu Benton has emerged as a premier force on the defensive line, and that's a big part of it. But also the practice squad guys. Trenton Thompson has filled in at safety very well. He's making tackles at the line of scrimmage. The cover 2 interception where he buzzed the flat and Joey Porter Jr. dropped back, completely fooled Jake Browning. Got the interception you wanted, was a game-changing, game-flipping moment that got the Steelers momentum and helped them charge back in the second half to get the win. Also, Michael Walker, the linebacker, number 38, who's been playing next to Landon Roberts, he's not doing anything spectacular, but he's being in position. And you can't think of too many times where he's out of position that's costing the Steelers. In fact, he had 5 tackles in this game. Michael Walker should be getting a lot of praise for just doing what he's supposed to be doing, coming off the practice squad on a short-term basis and getting in there. And who knows, maybe he's going to be the guy moving forward. I know the Steelers signed Miles Jack. There's questions about Shaq Leonard and all this other stuff, but Michael Walker doing a decent job. And maybe at some point he'll get exposed this season, but it hasn't happened yet. And this is a defense that now is expecting to get Minkah Fitzpatrick back next week. We've heard that from multiple places. My guys at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette have been saying that. You could also get Montravius Adams back next week, so that gives you more depth on the defensive line. And now you have your superstar safety back, and that could be a huge surge to make this defense even better than it has been. And again, you're getting in the next week, you're getting Kyler Murray and a Cardinals offense that did not look too good in their outing against the Rams. The Rams flattened them, and we already knew that the Cardinals were in a hurt place for where they were. But now they're coming off a tough loss, 37-14 to the Rams, coming to Pittsburgh, West Coast to East Coast. It's a big opportunity for the defense to keep building there. Then they get the Patriots, and they don't even know who their quarterback is going to be half the time. Another opportunity for the Steelers defense to build there. And if my math holds here, and I had to do some quick math to do this for the show because I was trying to put all these numbers together. But the Steelers are one of the best second half defenses in the NFL. I believe after this game, they are now averaging just giving up 7 points, just one touchdown in every second half per game this season. I believe because the Bills allowed 30 points after the first half in their game against the Eagles, that now means the Steelers have the second best second half defense in the NFL. That's only behind the San Francisco 49ers. That's elite adjustments and changes and calls on defense to figure out what opponents are doing in games to adjust. And sure, there's times the teams come out like in this game. The Bengals, they had a squib kick return that put them in good field position. They had that tip pass to Jamar Chase that got them greater field position. And there was one play where the Steelers were out of position for a tight end pass that got a touchdown. But that was it, and that was in the first half. After that, you didn't see any of that in the second half. The Steelers defense put the clamps down on the Bengals, and they held them to, I think, 3 points in the second half. Huge for them. So again, that's elite second half changes and adjustments on defense. And as much as people get on Teryl Austin when things don't look great for a second, that's about him. And we now know that Teryl Austin does call the plays because everyone was so eagerly pointing out at the end of the Packers game when Minkah Fitzpatrick was kind of telling Teryl Austin, hey, no, we got to switch to this, man. We're going to be in this. If Mike Tomlin calls the defense, wouldn't Minkah Fitzpatrick be saying that to Mike Tomlin? No, he's saying that to Teryl Austin because he's calling the defense. But in this, Teryl Austin is calling some good defense, and clearly he's getting guys to step up and make plays and fill in where injuries are happening. And so again, you're talking about a defense that hasn't played a full year with all of its stars, hasn't played a single game with all of its stars available for a full game. And you're talking about a defense that's finding practice squad guys to fill in certain spots and still being a top 10 defensive unit on the year when it comes to points allowed. That's more than anything you could ask for. And that's also with an offense that has not put them in a position to play with their ears peeled back at any point in time this season. You look throughout the games, as much as the offense deserves praise for the day, there still hasn't been a game where the Steelers have built up a big lead and the Steelers defense has been able to say, all right, guys, they're not running the ball and they got to pass it. We're going to key off on some things and making opponent get desperate. If the Steelers offense can do that down the stretch in these final games here a few times, that could allow the defense to finally play with some aggression, get some more turnovers, and be a more dominant defense that helps them get bigger wins down the stretch. This is, again, why I'm telling y'all, Steelers fans, you should be excited about this team. There's a lot of potential that can be realized, and very soon with the players on it, and the vibes look really good from the way that they're feeling after this win. We have a lot to still go over in this game. We'll do that with our Stars and Skull grades on our Tuesday episode where we go over things. I'm going to look over the All 22. You can see some of my review for the All 22 when I post it at Carter Critiques on Twitter. So do check that out there. Thanks again for everyone for tuning into the Locked On Steelers podcast. Steelers fans, enjoy your victory Monday. Your team is 7-4, and as it stands, they're second place in the AFC North right now, and they are a game back from the Kansas City Chiefs and a game and a half back from the Baltimore Ravens. Again, if they beat the Cardinals, they're just one game back from the Ravens. The Ravens still have to play the Chiefs. They still have to play the Dolphins, and they have to play the Steelers. There's time for the Steelers to win this division. We'll talk more about that when we get to our Tuesday episode here. Thanks again for tuning into the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. And find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every Monday through Friday talking about your Pittsburgh Steelers. We'll see you here Tuesday on the Locked On Steelers podcast.